A very good morning to one and all who have joined here for the webinar on developing online repository of startups developed or incubated and way forward plan organized by Institution Innovation Council of School of Allied Health Sciences, Vinayaka Missions Research Foundation, deemed to be University Salem. I welcome you all. A hearty welcome to our resource person of the day, Dr. Bhaskar Gupta, Dean Academics, IISc Innovation Ambassador, IIMT College of Polytechnic, Greater Noida. Welcome, sir.
Hello, can we start the program?
Yes, sir, you can start, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Am I audible to you? You can start,
Hello,
sir.
Dr. Kalai.
Question, sir.
Hello.
Sir, am I audible, sir? Sir, you can start, sir.
And you can start now. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Am I audible? Would you please let me know? Am I
Yes, you are
audible?
audible, sir.
Am I audible? Okay, but your voice is not audible, ma'am. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to express my views on today's session on developing online repository of startups developed, incubated, and way forward plan. And this is one of the quarter four activities. Would you please go to next slide? So what is the repository? That is very important to understand. A digital collection of the intellectual output of students, faculty, administrators, and others who are members of the university community. Expression of institutional vitality contribution to a growing network of open access scholarship puts faculty and students in the mainstream of scholarly activities. Next slide, please. Next slide. So what is an institutional repository? The content of an institutional repository is institutionally defined, scholarly, cumulative, and perpetual open access. Institutionally defined means you have to capture the original research and other intellectual properties created by the university's population across the different fields. Examples include preprints, peer-reviewed articles, monographs, teaching materials, conference papers, thesis, dissertations, computer software, your idea, your prototype, your proof of concept, and your startup, which has been incubated, can be uploaded in your online repository for the future use. Content submitted to the institutional repository should be both cumulative and maintained in perpetuity, open access, providing no or low barrier access to the university's intellectual products. So I hope you all must be knowing about intellectual property. At this point of time, I would not like to discuss. Next slide. Institutional repository can be classified into two: commercial repository and open access repository. So we have to understand ITOR, DSpace, DXLS, ePrints, FEDORA Commons, Opus are the most popular and widely used open access repositories available with us for uploading our startups, ideas, prototypes, proof of concept, or whatever, any kind of innovation. But if we look at the commercial repository, it is about digital commons, content DM, DigiProof, Hyperion, innovative interfaces, Vital are the different other softwares which are commercial softwares for creating and for the development of your repository in your academic institution, in your School of Allied Health Sciences. Next. Next slide. IRs can be used for scholarly communication, storing learning materials and coursework, managing collection of research, preserving digital material for the long term, knowledge management, electronic publishing, research assessment, and of course, a collaboration tool. Next. Institutional repositories of ideas is a very powerful idea that can serve as an engine of change for any institution. In this digital age, everyone wants contents and to be successful information service providers. So information center and libraries need to develop services in such a way so that the end users may manipulate the content as per their requirements in the future. Next. Therefore, in the present scenario, IRs have become an indispensable component for information and knowledge sharing in the scholar world. IR provides a method for capturing and maintaining today's electronic detritus so that tomorrow's scholars can understand the thinking behind the published record. Again, for the standard IRs, each and every institution should have to equip its library professionals so that they can be able to cope up with the ever-growing changes in this part. Next. Institutional repositories, digital collections that capture and preserve the intellectual output of university communities, responding to two strategic issues facing academic institutions. Number one, they provide a central component in reforming scholarly communication by stimulating innovation in a disaggregated publishing structure. Number two, They serve as tangible indicators of an institution's quality, thus increasing its visibility, prestige, and public value. Institutional repositories are a part of an emerging movement towards open access to research information. Next. Faculty and researchers at universities worldwide gather and interpret data, advocating new ideas and extending human knowledge. This work is sometimes shared with other scholars and researchers as working papers, technical reports, and other forms of pre publication work. Although this scholarship may eventually show up in a peer reviewed journal or a book, some may not. This preprint culture is the strongest in the scientific and technical disciplines, but social scientists share similar kind of work. Next. One of the ways in which authors can self archive their work is by depositing it in an institutional repository. This is a digital collection of intellectual output such as research articles, theses, and teaching materials produced by members of an institution and stored on the institution's repository server. Not only does IRs allow for the free access to these materials, these ideas, these POCs, these prototypes or startups, but they are also providing a way of storing and preserving them in a nice manner and if in effective way. Since the IRs contain the intellectual output of the university, and these outputs are very diverse and may include the preprints of articles or research reports submitted for publication, the text of journal articles accepted for publication, revised text of published work with comments from academic readers, conference papers, teaching materials, student projects, doctoral theses, and dissertations, data sets resulting from research projects, committee papers, computer software, works of art and photographs, and video recordings, etc. In very simple, an institutional repository may contain work of which copyright is owned by the author or university or for which permission has been obtained to include a copy of the work in the repository. Next, the potential uses of IR's content in other digital environment are countless. Institutional repositories content does not need to sit in institutional repositories only. It should be brought into the new digital environments where it can be easily consulted, represented, and integrated with other current research and educational activities. The institutional repositories content also should be collected in creative ways and not rely solely on being submitted by individual faculty. Next, digital repositories have a number of functions to open up and offer the outputs of the institution or community to the world, to impact on and influence developments by maximizing the visibility of outputs and providing the greatest possible chance of enhanced impact, to showcase and sell the institution to interested constituencies, prospective staff, prospective students, and other stakeholders in the ecosystem, to collect and curate digital outputs or inputs in the case of special collections. Next. To manage and measure research and teaching activities, to provide and promote a workspace for work in progress and for collaborative or large scale projects, to facilitate and further the development and sharing of digital teaching materials and aids, to support and sustain student endeavors, including providing access to thesis and dissertations and thereby providing a location for the development of key portfolios. Next. List of 6 factors that a business model encompasses are as follows: articulation of the value proposition for your startup, identification of a target market segment, definition of the business value chain, specification of revenue generation mechanism, specification of the business position within the value network, formulation of the business competitive strategy. These are all the important factors of any business model. Next. For institutional and other open access repositories, the value proposition can be summarized as follows: maximizing the accessibility, maximizing the availability, enabling the discoverability, enabling increased functionality, enabling long-term storage and curation, enabling other potential benefits. This is all about your value proposition from the repositories. Next. So if you look at this business analysis matrix for your startup, it looks like a business model canvas or the lean canvas, but it is not that. Business case. So here we have to discuss about viability, sustainability, and adaptability. If it is the business case, all three will work together. Does my business offer fit stakeholder needs and preferences? What are the likely cost of my product or service? Is my model adaptable as per the needs and wants of the customers? Can we develop and launch it? Do our resources at least match the likely costs? Can we build in resilience? Can we manage this business? What resources can we find? Will all stakeholders remain committed? Are all different important issues to be discussed, and thereafter you can maintain your repository for your startup. Next. There are already many examples of repository service in existence. Those related to ingest activities are digitization services, IPR, copyright advisory, information services, open access advisory information services are the different kinds of repository services already in existence. So there is nothing new, but now you have to do something new in terms of developing repository for your startups which have been incubated under the supervision of Atal incubation centers, other private incubators or accelerators present across the country. Next. Technical advisory services, repository building services, repository hosting services are already existing, repository services which we are aware of. Next. So description here, if you are going to work as a startup founder and you are ready with your business plan, so first you have to describe about your product or service. You have to identify your target segment, your target market, to whom you are going to sell your product, or growth trends in this business. You have to check, is that market okay for your product where you are going to launch? Pricing power are all the different important aspects of your business plan. Next. You have to describe that you are passionately committed to your new business and have the realism to make inevitable hard choices. Describe your work experience in the business you plan to start, including a list of your skills and knowledge which will be required in your business. Describe yourself properly and include your education also. Next. Furnish a tabulation of each piece of equipment you intend to use, including a description and the budget for each. Next. Explain the form of business organization you intend to use, why it is best for your business. List the names of your lawyer, accountants, insurance agent, or any other professionals list what licenses you will require to go into the business. What I mean to say, legal structure you have to be aware of, and ethical structure. Next, institutional repositories, by capturing, preserving, and disseminating collective intellectual capital, serves as meaningful indicators of an institution's academic quality. It has been seen that much of the intellectual output and value of an institution's intellectual property is diffused through thousands of scholarly journals. Next, an institutional repository of ideas or prototypes or startups has many benefits. It is providing, next please, after this. Yes, it provides long-term solution, improves scholarly communication, remedying the weakness of self-archiving, extending the work of disciplinary repositories, improving online teaching both on campus and via internet. Next, providing institutional information asset management, defining sources of research, identifying value to funding sources, and of course, raising the profile of the academic institution are all different benefits of using the repository of startups incubated or developed by startup founders. Next, institutional access to international research output, international access to research generated in developing countries, promotion of institutional research output, creation of partnership and networking. Next, software for repository. IBM issued digital library software in 1991 to manage collection of digital files for the first time across the world. IBM groundbreaking technology grappled with key issues of storage, maintenance, retrieval, and display digital content. This was the first effort towards the digital repository software, and it showed path to others. Next, there is now softwares easily available to create and maintain in institutional repositories, and as a result, the challenges in setting up an institutional repositories are now seen as being less to do with technology and more to do with managerial, organizational, and cultural issues. Some systems are open source while others are commercial. There are a number of softwares available today for creating or developing repositories of startups, ideas, prototypes, or whatever it is. Next, DSpace was developed. This is one of the repository softwares jointly developed by MIT Library and Hewlett Packard. DSpace modestly describing itself as a groundbreaking repository system. It captures, stores, indexes, preserves, and redistributes an organization's research material formats. These space support institutional repositories and electronic records management. These space is being used worldwide to meet archiving needs. ePrints. ePrint is other kind of repository software, digital repository software developed by University of Southampton to manage an open archive. ePrints was the Open Archives Initiative's compliant repository software. This is also very much widely used across the world. Next, FEDORA. FEDORA is very popular in India too. So it is a digital repository system developed jointly by Cornell University, Information Science and University of Virginia Library as project. The FEDORA project's goal is to provide open source repository software and related services to serve as the foundation for many different types of information management system. FEDORA is not a complete system such as DSpace and ePrints, whereas providing an infrastructure upon which 339 services can be developed. Next. Greenstone is equally popular, another software for building your repository. The software is produced by the New Zealand Digital Library Project at University of Waikato and developed and distributed in cooperation with UNESCO and human info. Next. Current institutional repository developments in India. In India, the efforts towards adopting open access initiative have already been started, but there are some hurdles and misunderstandings about open access among the Indian research community. These are lacks of expertise in every organization to promote creation of institutional archives and encouraging scientists to place their papers in them, lack of infrastructural facilities like hardware and connectivity of high internet, bandwidth of high internet. Scientists are under the impression that editors of renowned journals really not accept the archived papers. The scientists are not aware of the fact that the attitudes of the journals are now changing, and renowned journals now permit the authors to archive both preprints and postprints. Next. So if you look at the popular organizations like IIT Bombay and National Institute of Oceanography, NIT Rourkela, MDI Gurgaon, D-Space at IIM Kozhikode, National Chemical Laboratory. You can see here from this table, all of these prestigious institutions have been using D-Space software since last many years for archiving, for storing different kinds of documents, journal papers, proceedings, thesis, dissertation, your idea, your startup repository. So you have to develop the repository in your institute first, and then you have to upload, you have to create your repository for the startups. Next. So which are the important skills requirement? Management, software for this IR, materials, metadata, storage, preservation, content, licensing, advocacy, training and support, current awareness and professional development are the different skills required for creating and developing repositories. Next. Ability to manage the repository budget, develop a strategy and costing for the future development, source funding opportunities, managing the repository service by identifying goals, developing workflows to manage the capture, description, and preservation, managing the day-to-day running of the repository, including any mediated deposit service. Next. Coordinate and manage activities of repository personnel, set up test collections, monitor deposit, download, and other usage indicators to identify the impact and success of the repository, manage user expectations to ensure that expected service delivery is achievable, handling comments, complaints, and relationship if service delivery does not meet user demand. Next. Familiarity with standard web-based software system is very, very important. You must be aware of Linux, Unix, SQL Server, Java, PHP, XML, at least one major repository software like ePrint. I have given you so many examples. You can purchase ePrint, DSpace, FEDORA, Opus. So you can go for open access also. You can go for commercial also. Web-based software and databases, ability to customize, arrange and carry out testing of the system, design and develop repository interface, identify and develop value-added services. So these are the different things you have to be aware of. Next. Familiarity with relevant metadata standards, including Dublin Core, MARC, METS, MODS, ability to identify or develop appropriate metadata and other standards, lies and test implementation, ensure compliance and monitor metadata quality also on an ongoing basis. Next. Familiarity with about storage and preservation, current best practice procedures. Next, please. After this. Next slide. Yes. current best practice, procedures, and external advice and resources, ability to work with IT services, scope the long-term storage requirements of repositories, work with institutional personnel, including university records manager, archivist, and IT services, as well as external organizations in order to identify the best practices and to develop a policy for how different materials should be preserved. Next, familiarity with IPR issues needed when accepting material, needed to develop guidelines to ensure consistent good practice, must be able to provide advice on intellectual property rights issues, ability to develop a content policy, types of materials, how different materials should be managed, how embargo materials are to be managed, how withdrawals of deposited items are to be managed, increase the amount and quality of items, identifying suitable publications for deposit. Next, departmental web pages encouraging authors of suitable publications to deposit their work, explaining to authors how to self-archive or where deposit is provided, asking authors for files from authors and convert to appropriate formats, deposit in the repository on their behalf. Next, ability to liaise, identifying high level and longer term strategies, institution which may be met by the repository, identify and address any areas of concern, build awareness and confidence in the service, develop practical policies and procedures to ensure the repository becomes embedded in the research processes of the institution. Lies with a wide variety of departments. Senior institutional managers must be aware of the benefits of these startup repositories. Ability to develop an advocacy program, develop advocacy and publicity material for use, be very proactive, assess the training needs of specific stakeholders, develop suitable training programs and materials for those groups, organize and run training sessions, introduction to open access, how to deposit your startup idea or your proof of concept into this repository. There is a certain procedure for which you all will have to undergo exclusive kind of training from where you are going to purchase these repository softwares. Next, here are some of the key issues like the institutional culture, scope of the repository, content, access levels, legal aspects, standards, sustainability, funding are the different key issues while developing repositories. Next, comprehension. It means that all members of the team must share a common vision and understanding of the purposes and scope of the collaboration. It involves thinking and working together with different people contributing their different talents, working with others to solve problems and making important decisions. Next, context is each person's worldview and working environment. Each person has a unique mindset, innovative mindset, different mindset based on the background, education, and experience. Change. Repositories involve change in the way research is disseminated, preserved, and published. This change requires faculty to deposit, students to deposit their research results, data sets, and other materials in the repository. Next. Caring, you have to be caring, commitment is required, creativity is very much important, and competency are all the different parameters which are very, very important while you are going to develop your repository for your ideas, for your startups, and that way you can plan something for your future also. So you have to be caring, you have to be very creative, you have to show commitment, and competency must be there because much more competition is there. Next. An institutional repository can fail over time for many reasons: policy, management failure, or incompetence, or technical problems. A failure of institutional repositories can result in the disruption of access, or worse, total and permanent loss of materials stored in repositories. The institutional repositories today, there is much less redundancy than we have in our systems of print publication and libraries. So any single institutional failure can cause more damage. Next. Scientists, librarians, library professionals in developing countries like India need to aware themselves about the new opportunities provided by information and communication technologies. One way of doing this is to adopt the open access approach for the startup repositories. Central and state government departments, industries, academic institutions, research institutes in India should take an initiative and come up with their institutional repositories so that the research in India can be widely accessed by a scholarly community throughout the world. Thank you very much. That's all from my side. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhaskar Gupta, sir. It was a very nice session, sir, and an informative one too. Thank you so much, sir. Participants, the feedback link has been posted in the chat box. Please click on the link and give your feedback. I repeat, this is to all the participants. The feedback link has been posted in the chat box. Please click on the link and give your feedback.
Organizers of the webinar, that's all from my side. You can now take over.